really excited about this. I
Me
know
too.
that I'm so glad that you and I have been able to connect with each other. I think it was where was it that we initially connected with? Was it Facebook?
I think it was Facebook. I think I reached out to you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, because I'm on, everything. Sometimes it can
Mhm.
be a little overwhelming, but yeah, I'm glad that you and I are that we were able to connect because it is really, neat that people are able to connect with each other that have the same interests. And it seems like you and I have the same goals in, sharing our passion with, other people as well, which is really cool. And that you and
Hold on.
I, yep.
I hate when they come around with blasting their music like it's
Oh,
everybody's God. Huh. Okay,
right.
now we're good.
So, well, with me is if I'm out in my yard, our neighbors, they have tons of chickens, and the roosters just sometimes the roosters are so much where it's like, okay, I can't be out here with this live because the roosters are just like taking over everything. If you look at a lot of my videos, you'll hear roosters in the background going. But
Right.
yeah,
We
just
have chickens, so I get it.
right. And it's one of those where it's they're
They
usually
can be really
quiet
loud.
until you hit record.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes, that's when, things will, start,
They time it perfectly.
right, yeah, absolutely, they do. Um, so let's take a look here. I I think I have this set fine. Um, not seeing anybody coming on yet. Hmm. I think I set it to public. We'll give it a little bit longer. If nobody's coming on yet, I may have to restart it, make sure that I set it to public. Yeah, okay, someone's on. Welcome in. Thanks for coming in. We were just wondering if anybody was able to see this. I'm Jeff, and this is Frank, and we both
I,
hybridize roses and grow them from seed. Um, and very passionate about it and what both of us do. And thank you so much for the like. And what both of us we come online and on social media and show other people. How are you doing, Nihal Gaming? Thanks for coming in and hanging out with us. If you have any questions, let us know. But one thing that both Frank and I do is we share our journey of hybridizing roses, growing them from seed, and hopefully be able to inspire other people to do it themselves. It can be uh, it can be a confusing topic for a lot of people. It can be intimidating, and a lot of people may not have the confidence in themselves to try it themselves. So I think both Frank and I are aligned with that same goals. Trying to bring this to light. And encourage other people to give it a try themselves as well. So what we're going to be doing in the live, I think Frank, you're in your front yard.
yes.
Yep. And I'm in here in my greenhouse. And we're just going to be kind of going over the steps, the basic steps of how to hybridize, how to breed roses and grow them from seed yourself. One thing that's really cool is that Frank and I actually live on the opposite side of the country. And so we have different climates, and we have different space, and different equipments and methods and techniques. So we're going to be going over the basic steps, but one thing is that we want to emphasize that there are, you know, um, even though we
There
have,
are
a little bit different methods and techniques, we're doing the
a
same
lot of ways
basic
to get to
thing.
the same spot. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I get a lot of questions, asked, from people. and I'm sure you do too, Frank. And I'll let you uh, talk about that too if you notice this as well. I'll get questions from people that live in different parts of the country, with different climates. Like a lot of times, with timing. When should I be doing this, or when should I be doing that? And I let people know, hey, my climate is different than yours. A lot of it depends on the climate that you live in. Um, so I don't know if you get questions that are asked of you, that doesn't necessarily pertain to you personally, but it may be better for them.
Right. I mean, we everyone lives in a different microclimate, and that changes a lot as far as breeding and timing, because roses bloom at different times of the season. You got
Right.
those that bloom early, those that bloom later on, and then you're thinking, "Oh, I want to cross these two," but the timing.
Right.
How do you
Yeah,
do that?
because both the varieties need to be kind of ready at the same time to be able to
Exactly.
successfully pollinate them. It's kind of, if you're going on a date, both of you need to show up at dinner at the same time.
Same time. Hello. So
Right.
yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you just got to have fun with it.
Absolutely. It's all about having fun. And if you go into this hobby, just remember that you're going to be a lot more successful if you have the main goal of having fun and learning. Don't put huge expectations on yourself. It
No,
just it's all about having fun, and if you have that as your main goal, I have found that out, is that you're going to be a lot more successful with um, fun and your enjoyment being your primary goal.
exactly.
Yeah. So, um, all right. So Frank, just kind of, if you want, go ahead and kind of introduce yourself. What kind of got you into roses, and specifically, what got you interested in breeding roses? And
Um,
kind of a little bit of your wh- what 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 makes you tick, as far as getting into it.
well, I'm kind of a geek. I'm always looking for the scientific way of doing things, and I've done hydroponics, aquaponics. I'm doing tissue culture. I can clone vegetatively, and multiplying plants became easy for me
Right.
to the point where I just wanted to do something else. Roses has been something I've been doing since I was a child, but really got into it during the pandemic, because it was the thing that grounded me from the realities of my work. Because I
Right.
work for a hospital, and being a frontline worker, it was real, to see the least, of the impact that it had on us. And I think growing roses and plants is what grounded me and gave me a safe sanctuary
Right.
to move on. And then I started to notice that a lot of the roses that we grow here in New York City are susceptible to a lot of diseases. They get looked at the nurseries, but as soon as you put them in your yard, you got all these sorts of black spots, rust, and I'm like, what's going on? It
Right.
was a lot of work to keep them beautiful.
Yes.
It's got to be better quality. I said, you know what? I'm gonna start breeding roses myself
Yeah.
for hardiness, disease resistance, and fragrance. Something that I like to have in roses, especially that old world scent. And a lot of those roses are missing that.
Right.
And then you kind of like swap out fragrance for hardiness. If they're really fragrant, they're not really disease resistant.
Right.
So you kind of
Right.
like, yeah, there's got to be some kind of a middle, and that's what I'm
Right.
aiming.
Yeah, I think, over I would say probably, especially within like maybe the last 50, 60 years, a lot of roses that were bred for one specific trait, and all of the others were kind of ignored.
More.
So if they were, like hybrid teas, they were worried about was the form of the
Oh,
flower. and the disease resistances, the fragrances, the cold hardiness, which is something that where I live,
Need.
that's important for me. They kind of went off to the wayside. And then also too, a lot of the modern roses, um, they don't make good breeding parents themselves. That was kind of bred out of them. So that's something that I try to do too, is try to breed roses that make good parents themselves. So it can be easier for people to be able to breed roses and to get
Right.
viable seeds that grow well, as well. Yeah, so that's really interesting. So you really got into the hybridizing and the rose seeds, what, so
Yeah.
2020?
So I'm gonna say 2019, then 2020 is when I got really serious, and then I got hit with rosarian disease with one of my rose
Right,
bushes, and then I went into full panic because
right.
I said, "Oh my God, this is gonna spread to all the roses. I'm gonna lose all of my stock." I pulled it out. I put it in the fire pit. Didn't want to put that anywhere in the compost bin because I don't want to spread this thing.
Exactly.
And I
Hey, Connie,
stopped.
how are you? Thanks for coming in.
I just stopped for a while and to see if it did spread,
Right.
and it didn't. And then I got into dahlias, which is the other half of my channel, because I dahlias were my saving grace while I took a break from the roses. And I got good. I took everything I learned from roses and applied it to the dahlias.
Yeah,
But then, there's just one rose that I have in my yard called Brindabella Purple Prince.
I've heard
This
of
thing
it.
is bulletproof.
Good.
This thing
So
is,
you're using that.
I'm like, anything that happens in this backyard doesn't phase it.
That's
Heat,
good to know. That's
drought,
good to know.
powdery mildew,
So
rust,
Brindabella, Purple
purple
Prince.
print. And I'm like,
Oh,
damn, okay. And it forms beautiful hips and viable seeds. And I'm saying,
perfect.
I think we're
Perfect.
going to have to use this one.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
that became,
it seems like I've kind of fell into that as well. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, is that cold hardiness is really important for me. And for a lot of people too. We're we a lot of people get really cold winters. So having roses that are easily able to go through winter without without a lot of dieback, is really important. Um, so I have a rose, a Gallica rose, Tuscany
okay.
Superb, that I use quite a bit. With my breeding. Actually, I think, do I have the picture out here? I may not. I show it almost in every single one of my lives, but and I don't have it, of course. Um, but that Gallica can put out some pretty cool, offspring, especially the ones that I'm breeding with, like hybrid teas. Gallicas are old garden roses, so they only bloom once a year, um, and they tend to be they can spread very quickly. They have a lot of suckers. So that's one
Right.
thing that I try to breed out of, so then that way, a lot of people like, yeah, I really like that rose, but it can almost be like a weed, right? You have to really control it. Gallicas, I always suggest, growing in pots. That way you can kind of keep it contained. Um, I have mine in a like a in its own little garden space, with landscape brick, and it
Mhm.
still will send shoots out in the lawn, and growing through the cracks of the bricks. And I have a hydrangea, about 10 feet away from it, and
Okay.
I have the rose sending up shoots through the hydrangea. So,
That
there's a
looks
little
nice.
bit of drawbacks with it, but I've had that rose is the rose I've had the longest. I've had it for about 25 years now. Um, but
So we all have a favorite rose. Yeah.
it, I, I have it depends. I have a lot of different favorite roses.
For different reasons. Yeah.
For different reasons, right? But yeah, it's definitely, I would say it's my first rose for a lot of things. For kind of getting into roses, and also breeding roses. That was the rose I was successful with the first, as the seed parent. Um, so yeah, so I guess, so what we're going to talk about is kind of like the basic steps of hybridizing roses, breeding them, and getting them all the way through the seedling and, as a plant. It's kind of, a cycle, right? So there's not really, I don't like saying a first step, right? Because then we start getting into the what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? There's quite a few of the different steps that you can actually start off with, um, but but I would say, I would probably start off with like the pollination of the flowers. So I would say that's probably the closest to the beginning of of doing the process.
Selective
If we're
parent.
doing it
Yeah.
from home, is the pollination of the flower. So the time of the pollination, right? It really does depend on when your flower your climate, right? If you're watching from Australia, your winters are our summers. So if we talk about months or something like that, just keep that in mind. But with the pollination of the flower, the timing. So Frank, when do you usually pollinate or cross pollinate your
Okay.
roses?
This I'll be right back. Let me pull something off. I'm gonna be
Okay.
right back and show you what I
So
do.
while you're doing that, I'll go first. So with pollination of the roses, usually I start closer to the beginning of the flowering season. I will actually start doing my pollination during the first flush of the flowers. So for me, that usually starts eh, towards the end of May, and then I usually go through June, and the very beginning of July is the time for me. But the reason why I try to do it a little bit earlier of the growing season with the first flush of flowers, because after a flower has been pollinated, um, it takes about 3 to 4 months for the hips to fully develop and for the seeds to be fully developed and viable. And I try to, have as much time possible for my roses to get seeds that are fully developed because my winters, I get in, I hit freezing in mid-October. So in the beginning, towards the beginning of the year, is something that I try to go for. So I have enough time before my roses start going dormant. Because once they start going dormant, they're your seeds and your hips are pretty much developed, right? Um, so yeah, usually about May and June is when I will start pollinating.
Right.
So I don't know
Same here.
for you, Frank, the same thing, and you try to do it as
Same here.
early.
Except this season was a little funny. We've gotten a lot of rain, so everything bloomed all in one shot. So
Right.
now I have to wait for the second flush of
It-
flowers to really get my pollination on because
right.
everything it was an explosion of blooms and I wasn't ready. And all we did was get rain and rain and rain and rain. And I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna work. This
Yeah.
season's a bust. So now I wait for the second flush, and this is what I look for when it starts to open up. I sacrifice the bloom. The sepals,
Uh-huh.
when these sepals fold back, I know that this particular rosebud
Right.
is ready to receive pollen. That's that's my cue. I'm going. That's what I'm looking for in my rose bushes is which rose bud is already open for receiving its pollen. But I usually cover mine with a bag because I'm also a beekeeper. Before my bees get to it and pollinate it before me,
Right.
I cover, and then I
Right. Hold off 1 second. Your frame has frozen on my end. I'm not sure. It might be the wind. Right. I'm still not able to see you. So if anybody in here can let us know in the comments if Frank is frozen on your end as well, or it's just mine. I I can hear you, but your frame is still frozen. Yeah, Frank, you are frozen. I think it actually might be the wind. I have noticed, like, if I'm doing lives or something and I'm outside and it gets like and I get a gust of wind, sometimes it will kind of mess up, with the I don't know if that's true or not.
see you
So
perfectly.
you're good. You're good. Okay,
I'm
perfect.
good
Okay,
now.
you're good.
Okay.
But I'm also not hearing the wind, so that
Okay.
might be a thing.
So my thing is, once you see your rose flowers with the sepals like this, those roses are ready to receive pollen.
Right.
With
Okay.
my busy schedule, I sacrifice a bloom. I'll pull it off, and then I'll use this particular bud as a paintbrush and go dabbing on all those roses I find that are ready to receive pollen with my busy schedule, and then I make sure I label all those that I
Yes,
brushed.
label, label,
Because
label. Yeah, labels are so important
you
because
think
I,
you
I
will
think
remember, you won't.
exactly. I say the same thing too. So I always have. So these are the labels that I use for on my rows. So I have a. So this is a seedling that I have from this year that grew from seed. This actually came from a. This is a seed that came from a David Austin rose called Tottering by Gently. And if you're into roses, then you will know that Tottering by Gently is yellow. This, I'm not sure if you can see, um,
That's ready.
but it's not yellow at all. And from what I can see, it does have a tiny bit of pink in it, just a very, very slight pink. But that's the really cool thing about hybridizing roses is that you just don't know what you're going to get. Um,
But remember, you still have it in the greenhouse, so it may change once it's outside.
Right. Well, especially those, yellows are notorious, being out in the sun or the heat.
Yeah, they're
It,
chameleons. Yeah,
right. I live, I live in a climate where we get into the hundreds during the summer, and all of my yellow roses don't look yellow. They're very, very pale and almost white, right? So it's like
yeah.
sometimes I'll see people posting a picture of a yellow rose. I'm like, wow, I didn't know it can be that yellow.
Mm.
So one thing to take note of is that it is really great to see pictures that other people are posting of certain varieties online, but they may not look like that where you live. So I always suggest if you have a local rose garden, to visit your rose garden. That way, because they should all be labeled, what variety it is, and that is going to better represent what that rose will look like in your garden. So if
Exactly.
if I show you Tottering by Gently, my Tottering by Gently, it's yellow, but it may be a lot more pale yellow than what it would appear in your yard. Um, so just keep that in mind with
And
that.
then somebody asked a question here. Um, DC Channing would said, I thought it would be after the last flush to pollinate. Well, it depends on your zone,
Right. And
right?
now,
Because if you have a really short growing season, you want to get to it early on. That gives you enough time to have mature seed pods and have those seeds mature inside those pods before you collect them.
right, right.
If you have
I was
a longer growing season, then you can wait for a second flush. It all
right.
depends on your zone and the time you have and your schedule. Because trust me, Mother Nature has its own rules, and you think you're gonna pollinate that day, and the next you walked out is a thunderstorm.
Yep.
You get to it when you get to it.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I just recently got back from a trip from San Francisco, and I talked to a couple people that also breed roses or have bred roses in that climate. But they don't really, their roses never really go dormant, so they're able pretty much, they can,
Right.
pollinate,
Exactly.
later in the very late.
And I'm not me and you are not like David Austin, grow farmer. They have these controlled environments where they have portable roses and they can take them inside the greenhouse and sit there and pollinate and then collect those roses.
Exactly.
I don't have that luxury.
Ex-
You don't have that luxury.
right.
We're actually doing the grunt work in our yards,
Yes.
and we actually do it in real time.
Yes.
And don't give yourself those kind of expectations, because then you're gonna fail. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
If your rose is blooming, go for it. Sit there, pollinate, make sure you label. I can't stress the labeling part, because
Yes.
you
I
will
have
forget.
labels, well, I'll show you one of my flats. So, like I still have to, I'm still transplanting, but I have labels, on all of these, and I keep labels with everything. Gardeners, we are really good about we overestimate ourselves with labels. Even
Yeah.
if we buy a
Another thing,
plant, from the nursery and we plant it. Oh, I'm going to remember what that is. We won't.
no,
We won't.
no. And another thing I want to stress:
That's awesome
not
comment. And
everybody
yes, I'm also
has,
in 6B.
not everybody has acreages. I live in
Right.
an urban residential, city in New York City, and my seedlings were grown in little grow bags, little tiny grow bags,
Right.
and then I potted them up into these little pots. And
Hmm.
yes, everything gets labeled, and I also label the actual
Plant
seedling and
itself.
the pot,
Yep.
because these things fall off, they break,
Yep.
it happens. And
Yep.
then this is this year's seedling, and it's not even 4 months old yet, and it's
Yeah,
got
that's
nice size,
amazing.
and it has a few buds, and they're doing well. And I have them outside. I don't have a greenhouse.
Right.
I don't have acreages. I'm in a residential urban
Yeah.
neighborhood, and I'm pollinating and cross pollinating and growing roses from seed. So it can be done, and don't think that you can't do it.
Right.
It's fun. It's addicting. It's like potato chips. You just can't have one. You're
I
gonna keep
hope.
going and going and going. You can't
And
stop at
well,
one.
something I've fallen victim to is every year it is addicting. Every year I've been doing more and more, and I think this last fall I ended up collecting about 7,000 rose seeds, and
Oh my God.
cold stratified and planted them. That's why I'm still trying to transplant. But I do think I found my max. Um, with it, I don't think next year I'll be doing 7,000 seeds.
No way. I I couldn't keep up.
Right. Well, I had a lot of introductions, a lot of new roses, last year that I added into the garden. So um, and it was also the first year that a lot of my hybrids from the past had bloomed because I have the Gallica hybrids. It does take a few years for them to bloom because they only bloom once a year. So they bloom from old wood. So you have to
Okay.
wait a couple of years for them to actually get old wood before they bloom. So I allowed for open pollination, which open pollination we don't do it ourselves. We allow the bees and other pollinators
The
to
bees
do
do
it
it, and
as well.
they do a way better job.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Because like this whole thing with breeding roses from growing them from seed, you are going to have the best success the closer to nature that you can imitate. So with open pollination with the bees, that's what roses are designed for. They are designed for pollinators to do the pollinating for them. Everything about them, the size, the shape, where things are located is specifically designed for pollinators. um, and we just do the best that we can to imitate it, right? But open pollination, I allowed every rose to try to go, to try to get hip and viable seeds. But I fell into that trap where it's like, oh, I have 600 seeds from this one plant. I'm gonna plant them all, right?
No,
Yeah,
come on.
no.
Now,
I'm not going to do that again. I just don't have, the time, and this is about, like you said, it's about having fun. And as much as I enjoy it, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming if you start falling behind and you can't get yourself
yes,
caught up. And then
yes,
then what
and you don't want
happens.
that because it's supposed to be fun.
Right, right. Well, and then it affects, if you're behind on, if I'm behind on transplanting, then I may not be having the time, properly watering my seedlings or, keeping track of them. I like to take pictures of each of my seedlings and their flowers, kind of take note of each plant. So if I'm, if I'm spending all of my free time trying to transplant, I'm not taking that time, taking pictures, making more detailed, in-depth descriptions and taking pictures and possibly watering or fertilizing. Let's see. Jeff would need two more greenhouses if he tries to plant all the seeds again. Yeah. Yes. Space has been an issue. So even though I know Frank, you said you live in an urban, area, so you don't have a lot of space. I have half an acre, um, but with my climate, I need to start my seeds in my greenhouse. So this greenhouse I built, and then I also have another one on the other side of the garage that I built as well because of the space. But because of 7,000 seeds, I still did not have a lot of room. So I did have to plant, my seeds, in little 1 inch pots. And then I don't have that luxury to put them in 1 gallon pots when I transplant them. I do have to put them in 4 inch pots, and then once the ones that I keep, then I can put them into 1 gallon pots. But here's a seedling that I have from last year. Hasn't bloomed yet, but this is a seedling from 4th of July. But it's actually doing really well. So I just up potted that. But yeah, but I have to use a greenhouse so I can start my seeds a little bit earlier. And then I can also bring my seedlings into the greenhouse during the winter. Um, I still allow them to go dormant. It still gets below freezing here, but we can get to 0 degrees, -5 degrees in the winter. So I just keep them in the greenhouse just to get them a little bit, keep them a little bit more protected, for the first year, um, before I just throw them out in the garden. uh,
Now, I have a trick for the open pollinated. You have a little. controlled open pollinary
Do
thing
you
that I
remove
do.
the center petals?
So the best part about growing in pots is I'm able to isolate certain roses together and leave them in a certain area, and then the bees kind of cross pollinate them for me.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's a good idea.
I and more or less I said, okay, well these could be cross pollinated. I still label them as open pollinated, but in the back of my mind I said, hey, this was a Coco Loco State of Grace cross because they were the ones that were close together,
That were close
isolated.
together, right? Yeah, and the so with open pollination, roses can be self-pollinated. So you can have your Coco Loco crossed with Coco Loco,
Coco Loco.
but that doesn't mean that any of the seedlings, none of the seedlings are going to be genetically the same as Coco Loco.
Right.
And that's really cool too. And that's why I think a lot of people shy away from open pollination, because they're like, well, I want to grow seeds where there are going to be different varieties. um, and open pollination, they are all going to be different varieties. You just don't know who the father is necessarily. um, but yeah,
But that's the
you're
fun.
right. So yeah, and it saves you a lot of work too. So if you're busy during this time of year, or you're just not interested in doing the pollinating yourself, let the bees do it. You still are going. It's still a hybrid rose. It's still a hybridized rose. Um, and just remember that none of your seedlings from an open pollination is going to give you what you already have. They're all going to be different, and they can look
Different.
quite different than their parent. I've had self-pollinated Fourth of July seedlings that look nothing like Fourth of July. So don't be afraid to open pollination. um,
And
but yeah, so with the open pollination, there's a good chance that it is self-pollinated. So we'll say your Coco Loco. There's a good chance that Coco Loco was the pollen parent and the seed parent, right?
correct.
But you still have a higher chance that the rose right next to it is the going to be the pollen parent, right? So
Correct.
if you are trying to get certain crosses, and if you're have them in pots and it's easy to get them together like you have, then you're increasing the
You're
chance that you're
increasing the
getting
chances. Yes,
yeah. As opposed to having one, across the yard or from your neighbor, which you can get too. I mean,
exactly.
bees, you can get a pollen parent uh, from a house down the block from you. You just don't know.
And what else? Now harvesting the seeds, I always wait till the pods change color. Not all
Yes.
of them do though.
Right. So usually, so what I
Like
mentioned,
119 days, I leave them on there.
yeah. So I will. So about 3 to 4 months, depending on the variety of the rose. Um, we try to imitate nature as close as possible,
Possible.
and um, in the wild. So I always try to think, okay, what would these roses do? In the wild. Um, Most rose hips they'll start swelling, and they'll start getting almost fleshy. Not, they can get super soft, but then that's a whole other thing. They're overripe at that point. They start getting mushy, but they almost kind of feel. I like to compare it to like the fleshiness of an apple. So if you go to the grocery store, and you're picking up apples, and they kind of have that little bit of a fleshy give. That tells me that they're ripe.
I'm ready.
And a lot of rose hips will start turning some kind of color. Most of the time, it'll be orange or red. Sometimes you get, like a dark yellow, but I've seen some that are black. I've seen some that are purple. I've seen, and if you know what roses they are, let me know. But I've seen the ones that have like little spikes on them too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so those are really cool. But in nature, rose hips will, start swelling, will start, getting that fleshy feel, will start, turning bright colors for they are trying to attract wildlife to actually eat the hip because hips are fruit. And they actually apples are actually in the rose family. So there's a lot of similarities between apples and rose hips, but they will try to be attractive for the wildlife. They want wildlife to come and consume the hips that contain the seeds. Then they can drop them off at another location, and then the seeds can start growing. So when it comes time to harvest rose hips, I'll go around, and if they feel a little fleshy, or in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I'm a bird, would I want to eat that right now? So you try to get in the mind of nature, right? Let's see. I'm a serial pruner, so if you pollinate during the first flush, then around when would the pods be ready? Like August. It's a miracle. Yeah. So, yeah, that is one thing. If you are pollinating and want rose seeds, you don't want a deadhead, especially the flower that is pollinated. Um, so, yeah, about 3 to 4 months. I would say August
Yeah,
for
about August.
me. Yeah, for me, my rose hips are more um, ready like September and October into
Same here.
November.
Yep.
Um,
Especially if I got it on the second flush.
right. Now the first flush. So if you do it like in May, and like I said, 3 to 4 months, but I'm not sure. I think the climate has something to do with it too. I think they try to time, their rose hips being being ripe and ready for harvest in the fall. So I don't know if they kind of slow down during the heat of the summer so they can try to time it, to where their hips are ready.
I think
Because I
daylight
haven't.
hours had something to do with it.
Okay, okay, yeah. So I haven't really noticed a huge difference between the flowers that I pollinate in,
May.
May or in July. It does seem like their hips are fairly close to being fully developed at the same time.
It's the stratification time that has to be done right.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that actually makes more sense. Is the light, um, but also too, you look at other people's videos or whatever. You will, if you do more research about how long it takes for rose hips or seeds to fully develop, you are going to see quite a bit of a range of what
Mhm.
people tell you how long it takes from pollination to a ripe rose hip. And just remember that that has something to do, it has a lot to do with people's climates, where you are, where when you started, when did you pollinate? When do you get your first frost? How much light do you get? People that live, more north in the summer are going to receive more light than people that live, more in the south.
Right.
So yeah, yeah. I'm gonna have to pay a little bit more attention to that. That's why I like doing these lives too, is that, I get so many good questions, and sometimes I don't really know the answer. And that's what's the fun of this, is the constant learning. So I really do appreciate the questions, even with the answers that I don't know. And I'm not one of those where, I'm like, I'm not afraid to say, hey, I don't know. But those are the
It's a learning
questions.
process. That's it.
Absolutely. I always say I will always be a student, always learning, always learning. So, yeah, actually, Connie, there, P, Channy, um, just mentioned, talking about deadheading. So after the pollination is kind of, the next step, really, I consider is the seed and the hip development stage, which we talked about 3 to 4 months, on average. But that is an important step. There's a lot of things, that we still need to do for our roses, things that we don't necessarily want to do while the seeds and the hips are developing. And I think one of the most common things that happen, and I know it's happened with me, I put money on it that it has happened to you, where you have accidentally deadheaded the wrong flower and you cut off a hip that you had pollinated. You never have? You've never? Or you have? You have. Okay, you're
Not only that, um, I have my pups will come out into the yard and they'll chew it out. I'm
oh
like,
yeah.
no.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So that is something that unfortunately does happen. But you only have to do it a couple of times. And then I think that just like, it's upsetting enough for you to even pay more attention when you are going out. And if you are deadheading, it's like, okay, I really want to double check, make sure there is not a tag. You will follow the stem up or down, make sure.
Yeah.
And that's why, too, that labels are really important.
Oh my
Um, you
God.
know, you have a label underneath a rose,
And a
it's
good
like,
marker. A good marker.
I'm glad that you said that too. So I actually I don't know if this will come in. One thing that I initially began with was just a regular Sharpie,
They
and
fade.
Sharpies are water based and they fade so quick. And
They
there's nothing
fade.
more annoying than having a tag that fades. So I did do some research, and oil based permanent markers withstand, the sun, the heat, the water, everything like that. I think I just got this at like a Hobby Lobby or something like that, but it is an oil based permanent marker. So um, I learned the hard way. There are a couple of them that I'm just like, they're so faded. I'm like, I don't know, so I'll like try to, take like, okay, what marks do I see? So I'll kind of overlap the marks. I'm like, okay, what could this be? So I'm like, oh, okay, this was a
Oh my
cutting
God.
from Olympiad,
I've
because
gone
I
as
can kind of
far.
see the O and maybe a little bit of a Y. But
I've gone as far as use the negative reverse app where you take a photo negative and it reverses it,
oh, okay, does that work?
and then so you can make out because there's still going to be like a different color tone. And oh, now I know what it is.
Really, I'm gonna have to try that. So you take the picture
So
and
it's
do a
like it
negative.
reverses the image in like a photo, and you get
Yeah,
the actual photo image, like the negative,
yeah.
because if you're going to leave the mark, even though you
I did
can't
not
see it.
know that. That is
Yeah,
I did not know that. That is a
so that works.
really good.
Not all the time, but it works.
That
Yep.
is I had no idea. I'm gonna have to give that a try. I know I have, plenty of tags that I can do that with. I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yep, that
That's
works.
awesome. Yeah. So yeah, so I always, when you are pollinating or you're allowing for open pollination, um, knowing that there is a possibility that we can accidentally deadhead, some of them, some of the potential hips and seeds by accident. Just I always suggest doing more pollinations or allowing for more open pollinations than what you initially want.
Yep.
Just because you may accidentally cut the wrong flower off. Um,
And not everything takes. So
exactly. I would say I, with the cross pollination, if we're doing the pollinations ourselves, and a lot of it depends on the seed parent, the variety, because
weather, timing,
some of them make better seed parents and pollen parents than others. But I would say overall average on the safe side, I would say maybe a quarter to maybe a third of the pollinations will actually give you a fully developed hip, with seeds. I don't know if that is what you've noticed, but about a quarter to a third of your
about that.
pollinations will,
And
will
then
take.
you get to the next stage, you stratify them. Not all of them will sprout.
Exactly. Yeah, seeds are roses are not known to be great germinators. I always try to let people know too. That hey, don't expect them to be like
Yeah.
marigolds. You, you know,
And
it,
some sprout, and then all of a sudden they just stop growing. They
right.
just
I
fade out.
think I have a couple of them. Um, did I? One second. I did see it last night. But it was one of my first seeds that germinated, and it has done absolutely nothing.
Ah,
It
wait, I
hasn't
have one.
grown.
I have one.
Oh, perfect.
Now I showed you the other one. Showed you this one, right? That this
Yep.
is the nice one, right? This was the same age.
Yep. Yep.
Nothing.
Yep. And
It had two leaves.
are those seeds from the have the same came from the same hip?
No, this is
Oh,
when I
different.
showed you a sibling. The sibling is here.
Oh, yeah. Yep. But see,
This
that's the really
these
cool
came
thing
from the
about
same pot.
breeding roses is that they're all genetically different, from their parents and from their siblings. And a lot of people, will think that, oh, you just see the flower, right? We just think of the flower, but there's so much more, the growth habit, the leaf, the leaf color and the shape, disease resistance. There's so much, and that's why I also appreciate with breeding too is that it kind of opens your eyes up to roses, like more traits, with the roses. It's like, a lot of people just see the flower and just think of the flower, but there's so much more to a rose than the flower. And then when you're
They got
breeding and growing
yeah.
them from seed, you're it kind of opens up your eyes and you are able to see your roses at different angles and get to know them a little bit better, than just the flower.
Then you also have
So
leaf texture. Some of them have that old world green, and then you have the newer modern roses with the shiny dark green
yes.
leaf on it.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to show it to you. I'm going to wait a little bit, but I actually, well,
Yeah.
I don't think it's black spot. I think the leaves are a little variegated.
Oh, okay.
but I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait to see. It does not look like black spot to me at all.
But okay, here's the thing about the black spot thing. Um, like I said, that bulletproof rose I mentioned,
Uh-huh.
when the purple prince. Now that little seedling, if it has an excellent bloom,
It'll
I
have
will
black spot.
over I will overlook the black spot, and then I would cross it with that bulletproof
Yes.
to see if I can get the color and form of the bloom with a black spot resistant rose.
Right. Well, and see, I do that too. So, like my first, I guess, I would say my first generation, right? I allow for open pollination. The pollinations that I do by hand, I don't necessarily think about the parents, right? I just try to do any and every combination as I possibly can, just to see what I get, right? Um, and then out of those seedlings, the ones that I keep, then that's when I will start kind of honing in and paying attention. Like, okay, what about this seedling do I like? What are the desirable traits in this? And what are the traits that I don't necessarily care about, or what traits do I think would be interesting, that this rose would have instead? And that's when I'll be like, okay, for example, my Gallica hybrid, it only blooms once a year, so I would like to get that rose, to continually bloom so I can enjoy it more throughout the year. And it doesn't have a big fragrance, right? It doesn't have much of a fragrance. But I love the color. It almost a lot of people are like, oh, it looks like an English rose, right? Um, and it's red. It is a red color. So you don't really see, those English type roses. Um, that's a red. Usually they're like white, a couple of yellows, but usually the white, pink, purple, right? You don't really
Mostly
see a
pink, yeah.
whole lot of reds. But its father is Olympiad, which Olympiad is a red hybrid tea. So it took on the color of, the pollen
Nice.
parent of Olympiad. But with that rose, I'm like, okay, what do I like about it? And it's also really, really cold resistant as well, super cold resistant. But I would like to see it, bloom, perpetually. I'd like to see it, bloom more throughout the year. And I would like to see it, I would like to be able to have it have a fragrance, a stronger, fragrance. So then I'm thinking, okay, what do I have currently, right? Because you want to use and utilize what you
But yeah,
have.
exactly.
The roses that we have in our yard, we bought them for a specific reason. So I try to remember that too. It's like, why did I buy this rose? What was it about this rose that I got this rose? And those are like, okay, that's the trait. You know, I'll kind of mark that as a plus trait. So if I have seedlings that doesn't have that trait, then I'm like, oh, okay, I have a couple roses, that fit what I'm looking for. So I have a rose, Mr. Lincoln, which
Yeah.
it's a red. It's a hybrid tea, so it blooms continuously throughout the year, but it's fragrant, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this red, Gallica hybrid that I have, I'm going to try to cross that with the Mr. Lincoln, so I can try to keep that form. There's a good chance I'm going to keep that red color, but I might be able to get some fragrance out of it, and I may be able to get it to continually bloom throughout
Are
the
you
year.
gonna cross it both ways?
Yes. No. For whatever reason, I cannot get Mr. Lincoln to set hit for me, and I'm
Okay.
thinking a lot of my hybrid teas, I am not able to get hips from. I've given up on Double Delight. Double Delight, I cannot get any hip, and I cannot get any pollen from. But I think a lot of it has to do with climate. I have tried years, for several years to try to get pollen from Double Delight. I've tried for years to try to get Mr. Lincoln to set hip for me, and I just can't. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna stress about it. I can get pollen from Mr. Lincoln, so I've been getting pollen from Mr. Lincoln and applying it to my hybrid, and I'm fine with that. I'm not gonna, if something doesn't work out for me, if I can't get a specific variety to be
I
a
may I may
particular.
have I may have a little one for you. I don't know if you have it in your location, but I know that the Brenda Bella series has a deep dark red, and it's also bulletproof, and it does form
Oh,
hips.
perfect. Okay.
And
Do you
I
know
don't know the
the?
name of it, but if you look up the Brenda Bella series, it's gonna come up.
Okay, look
Maybe
for the red one.
dark night, dark something,
Okay.
but it's under the
Okay,
Brenda
I'll have to
Bella.
look that up. Thank you. Yeah. So that's gonna I'm gonna see what I'm gonna end up getting from that cross next year when I grow the
Sounds exciting.
seedlings. Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing I do is the first year I just make as many different combinations as I can. I think like the named varieties I have in my yard, I think I'm only at like 40 some roses. So
I'm
but that's
65.
the what?
I'm the 65 cultivars here.
Yeah. So I moved over here from Seattle area. I grew up in Seattle, but about 14 years now I've been on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains, which the climates are different in Washington State. A lot of people think that Seattle's in Washington, so all of Washington rains. No, only the western side of Washington rains. The eastern side is very desert-like. But when I lived over there, I think the most I got up to is like 138 or 130 something roses. But I'm slowly getting back. But I mean, if my seedlings count, I have 1,000
Yeah,
roses right now.
but if you count the seedlings, I'm done. I have no more
Exactly.
room.
Exactly, right? But still with 40 some roses, and I don't know if Connie's still here, Peach Annie, but she does. If you have Instagram, I'll let you know. Her She has an incredible rose garden, incredible rose collection. She is a rose nut in a good way, in a
Nice.
good way. But it puts videos out all the time, with all the new roses that she has in her gardens. Really, really cool. Um, a wide selection of roses that she has. But still, with 40 some roses, that's a lot of different combinations and crosses that you can make. And I kind of, I guess that's the gambler in me. I kind of like that lottery system to see what I can get. It's like this is the open pollination from Tottering by Gently. um don't know if I can get the.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, thank you. But more than likely, Tottering by Gently is both the seed and the pollen parent. But don't know. But more than likely it is. But where was I going with that? Oh, but it's like Tottering by Gently. I am not afraid to throw Coco Loco on it. To cross Tottering by Gently with Coco Loco, even though they're completely different colors. Their flower forms are different. Their growth habits are different. I'm not afraid to make that cross because that's when you can get some really interesting crosses. Um, and then Fourth of July, I think would be very interesting to see what you can get with Fourth of July crossed with Tottering by Gently. And I know that Fourth of July makes an incredible, incredible seed parent for me.
Now,
Almost
yes.
every single flower it comes to hip. Whether I pollinate it myself or it came from open pollination. Usually I have so many rose hips from Fourth of July that I don't harvest them all. And I would say that the germination rate with Fourth of July is probably close to about 75% for the seeds.
Okay.
which is super high. I like throwing Fourth of July on, almost everything that I can, and
Anything.
everything on the Fourth of July, because you
We
just
all
don't
have
know
a
what you're
favorite
gonna get.
rose.
Exactly, right?
It's our
Um,
go-to rose. Yeah,
right. Also, Olympiad. The red hybrid tea. I know that it does not make, it doesn't produce any hips for me. I think one year I got one hip from it, but I didn't get any seeds that germinated. And I was thinking, I spend a lot of time and effort trying to get Olympiad to set hip, and it's not worth it for me anymore to try to continue to try. So I actually prefer to be able to deadhead my Olympiad so I can get more flowers, throughout the year, and I still can use it for pollen. Um,
right. And
y-
in
you know,
that
so
sense, when you do that, you increase the viability of the other rose.
right, right, yep. Yep. So, I think that's the fun part, is the experimenting, playing kind of the lottery system, seeing what you get from these, I'm not afraid to, cross two very different looking roses, um, and seeing what I end up getting. It can
That's
be
the best
very
part.
interesting, some of the crosses can be very interesting. I'm just doing this. The sun was glaring on the
Then you have
screen
that
from
one odd.
yeah. What did that? But it's really cool because like you can look back and be like, oh wow, it actually it looks very close to its one of its grandparents or one of its great grandparents. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you're right, Connie. The pedal shapes. I have noticed. I've quite a few this year. I ended up getting some roses that had very pointed petals, so they almost look like a star. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, those are really fun. Yeah. So no, I'm not afraid to to crossing very different varieties with each other. Because the more different they look, a lot of times the results are you're going to have a much wider range of results. If you're there's a good chance that if you breed, for example, we were just talking about Olympiad and Mr. Lincoln, they're both red hybrid teas, right?
Will be red.
Get a pink, you still may get a white. I think they're wet rose. There's a rose where it is lavender, and there was a breeder talking about that. And every single time that they have used that lavender rose, almost every single one of its seedlings come out orange. So you still don't know. I can't remember the variety name.
I'll keep that
I'll
in
remember
mind.
as yeah, I'll remember as soon as we end the live. That's usually how it works. But the closer you know,
Mm, I lost you. You're frozen. Oh, yeah, yeah, frozen.
am I better now?
Yeah, in and out.
In and out. I had someone call me so on the phone, so I'm not sure.
Okay, now you're better.
Maybe lagging. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, someone was calling me on the phone, so I think that messed it up. But yeah, so that's why I'm not afraid to, it's like, okay, tottering by gently, and Olympiad. Let's do it. Let's see what we
Ah,
get from,
looking
a
forward to
red
those seedlings.
hybrid tea and a single petaled yellow shrub rose. What are you going to get? You know, so that's the fun of it too.
Absolutely. Just
You
have
know,
fun with it.
yeah, absolutely. And and Connie, that's why, it's like, I don't have that, you know, Frank said that at the beginning of the live, but I'm also the same way too. I do this with the intent of having fun with it. I don't expect myself to be the next David Austin. Maybe one day, but I do this for fun. Um, and for me, it's fun and exciting to see what I get with all the different crosses that I make. I don't necessarily make deliberate crosses initially, to see, for the first generation. Usually it's after that first generation that I will start being a little bit more picky and be like, okay, what traits, don't I necessarily like about this rose, and what roses do I have that have that trait that I'm looking for? Is this
Exactly.
seedling, not fragrant? Okay, what roses do I have that has fragrance? So those are going to be the ones that I am, going to be crossing them with, to make deliberate, deliberate crosses with.
And don't and feel free to use helpmefind.com to do a little
Yes.
research on the roses that you do have so you can make a better, organized choice of how to cross. That way you know,
Right.
hey, this one has this trait, this one has this trait. What happens if I combine the two?
Yes,
Because that's what I use.
absolutely. Yep. Well, and help me find. Now I know that I think it's about $5 where you can get the paid.
I
Where
think
it
it's
opens
25.
everything.
I
Is it
think
that
it's
much now? Anyway,
$25. And you get the whole family tree. Right.
and some of the pluses. But oh yeah, help me find is amazing. But at the very bottom of every rose that you're looking up, it will tell you if if it's known, even if it's not known. A lot of times, in
The parents.
parentheses, it will tell you its parents. So usually, so whenever you're breeding, the first name that you see of the parentage is always going to be the mother or the seed parent, and
The
then the
pollen.
second, or the second name, is going to be the
All
pollen
the parents.
parent.
Yeah.
So when you are looking at, a rose and you see a name and then X and another name, then know that the first one is the pollen, or the seed parent, the
It's the
mother,
first.
and the second one is the father,
Yep.
or the pollen parent. Um,
So it's good
and
information to know.
right, so with Help Me Find, if you look at 4th of July, right? I think 4th of July's seed parent, I can its parents is Altissimo and Roller Coaster. So Altissimo is a red climber, and Roller Coaster is a miniature climber that looks just like 4th of July. I may be wrong, but I think Roller Coaster is the seed parent. I may be wrong, but anyway, so if you look up a rose, pay attention. If you're breeding, pay attention. Just type in roses that you can think of, and then look at the bottom and be like, okay, who is the seed parent and who is the pollen parent? And then it's like, okay, this roller coaster, right? I'm seeing this being, I've seen this a couple of times being a seed parent, so
That's a good
maybe I
seed
can,
mother.
right. That might be a rose that I might be interested in getting myself. If it is a known parent,
Exactly.
then I may have a better chance at being able to use it as a parent myself. Now, if you get the upgraded
Membership.
membership or whatever, then it is easier to work with the breeding part, because you can go into the lineage of a rose,
Right.
and you can look at several generations. You can not only just its parents, but its grandparents, its great grandparents, great great grandparents, and you can also see if it has any descendants itself. So it's a lot easier. So I can put in 4th of July, and I can see if there's any roses that came directly from 4th of July. Then I can click on those specific roses, look at the bottom, and I can see if 4th of July was the pollen and or
The
the
seed
seed
parent.
parent. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, then I can go throughout all of my roses that I have, and I can put them and help me find. I can see if they have any descendants, and I can be like, okay, this rose that I have is a pollen parent for a lot of different roses, but I don't see any that's a seed parent. So maybe it
Well,
doesn't produce hips, but
exactly.
it produces
It's
viable
pollen.
pollen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it kind of helps me, with that. Or, if I'm rose shopping, right? It's like, okay, I need to, 40 some roses isn't enough. I need to get a couple more. Because I do a lot of breeding. That's one thing that is important for me, is to get roses that I can breed with, that I can use with breeding. So, I we all have a list, a never ending list of roses that we want. Um, so I'll kind of go through that list and be like, okay, I'll type it in and be like, hey, is this a known parent? And if it is, then it's like, okay, yeah, I think I'll get this one. You know,
Yeah.
um,
It's a
but
great
yeah, it's
resource.
kind of interesting. Sorry,
It's a great resource.
it really is. It really is. But yeah, so yeah. So I don't know. Um, We've been talking a long time.
What happens when you get people that like roses?
I know. We can just talk constantly. So it's funny. I went down to San Fran. There were a couple of rose societies, because I don't have a local rose society near me.
Nor do I.
Um, yeah, and it's just, I think the closest one is like 3 hours away. So through Instagram, social media, I was able to talk to quite a few people that were in rose societies near the San Francisco area. Um, and thank you so much. Thank you, Connie, so much. I really
Thanks,
appreciate that.
Connie.
I'm gonna try to rope Frank into, or Frank. Sorry, it's backwards for me. So I'm gonna try to rope you into. I'm thinking that doing like a monthly live with you would be awesome. Um,
Okay, cool. Be happy to
and then
do
we
it.
could just kind of talk about, hey, this is what's going on, and all of that, and
East Coast, West Coast.
yeah, right. And just kind of see what's, give each other and everybody else updates of what's going on. And that's what's really cool too, is that one thing that can be very confusing, with roses, specifically breeding them, growing them from seed. They're not complicated steps, but there are steps involved with it. And the more you research, it's one of those, how there's a lot of topics. The more you research something, the more confusing it can be.
Mhm.
It can be that way with roses and hybridizing them, breeding them, growing them from seed, because there are a lot of different variations and ways that you can go about doing it. And even though you and I, when we talk about how we do certain things, I've noticed there's a few things that we do exactly the same, but then there's some that are, pretty far away from each other, but we're still going about the same basic steps.
We
So
pollinate differently. I
we
pollinate.
we do pollinate differently, yes.
I do fast track
Um,
pollinating. You do a
right.
more
So you Right. So you will look at that moment. What rose has pollen? What rose
Let's
is
go.
able
What's ready?
to that wants to receive pollen right now? Um, I go about um, I go about it. I kind of do the 2 day process where I will go towards the evening one night or one evening, and I will go around and I will find roses that haven't quite opened yet, and then I remove all of the petals, and then I don't have tweezers in here, but I'll take tweezers and I will pull off all of the stamens, and I leave the rose, the rose in on the plant. If I remove the stamens, I put them in like a little shot glass. Cheers. And I will bring them indoors, and I spread them on a sheet of paper overnight, and then that dries them up and they'll release the pollen. Then I put the pollen back in, funnel everything back into the cup, and then the next day, then I will go back to all the flowers that I got ready. They still have the stigma, and then I will go ahead and pollinate. Do my pollination that way. And so the way you do it, the way I do it, just remember, and if you have already done research before, or you're going to be looking more into researching more, you're going to notice that there are people that are going to say, hey, I pollinate this way. It's going to be different than what I do. It's going to be different than what Frank does. But
Yeah,
remember that we're
it,
all pollinating, so there's different ways that you can do it, and I
it's
am.
whatever works for you.
Absolutely. I always say what works for you, what gives you the best results, what makes the most sense to you, what you enjoy doing the most, right? This is all about supposed to be having fun, right? So if you don't enjoy, how I do it, then don't do it. Do it the way that Frank does it. Do it the way that someone else does it.
But
But
remember to label it.
yes, yes, label, label, label. Yep, labeling is very, very important. Very, very important, because you will forget. It can get
Yeah.
very confusing very quickly. Um, but yeah, so I always suggest, if you're doing it for the first time, um, take note of how I pollinate. Take note of how Frank pollinates. Take note of how somebody else pollinates, and maybe try all the different techniques, and just, keep note. Okay, this flower I pollinated this way. This flower I pollinated that way. And it's like, okay, I tried all three of these, three different methods of pollinating.
And there's
I
always
enjoyed
open
doing it.
pollination.
Right, and open pollination. I enjoyed this technique the best, right? And if you get more hips and more seeds, and eventually seedlings from a certain way that you pollinated, and you enjoy doing it, stick with it. That's the way you
Stick
pollinate.
with it.
That's the way that you want to pollinate from there on out. But don't be afraid of testing different methods, techniques throughout it. Nothing, you never have to set anything in stone.
Nope.
So that is, that's something too, that's part of the fun, is just the
It is.
learning and the experiments and the testing, and talking with others. When I first started, learning how to do it myself, it was overwhelming, and confusing because of all the different information. It's like, okay, when I pollinate, do I use my finger? Do I use a paintbrush? Do I use a Q-tip? Do I use, like what you do, Frank? Do I use a flower that has pollen on it and use it as a paintbrush? And it's like, I don't know what to do. So it's just overwhelming. I'll do it next year.
Whatever works for you.
Right.
That's how it is.
But I've learned to embrace the differences, and I actually enjoy talking with other people that do the same thing, that also breed roses and are successful with it. And I really enjoy the differences that we go about each of the steps. That I think that's the most interesting talking with other people. It's like, oh, that's really cool how you do it. I do it this way, you do it that way. You gave me a really good idea. I'm going to try, what you do, so
Yeah. And
don't let it be confusing or intimidating. That's kind of the fun part.
the biggest payout is when you open that refrigerator door and you go open that Ziploc and you see that little tail from that seedling. You're like, ah.
Yes. Yes, it is so cool when you get
Then
when you
at
get them.
that point, you become a helicopter parent and you want to baby that little seedling all the way up to its true leaves. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
That's how it
So
started.
so when you are stratifying, um, your seeds, do you keep them? So I know a lot of people do it a little bit differently. Like we were just talking about. Um, I tend to. I will keep all of my seeds in the refrigerator for 12 weeks, or when they start germinating, whatever comes first. So I don't know if, a lot of people say, I see a lot of, information out there where they say, oh, rose seeds only need to be in the refrigerator or cold stratify for 6 weeks. For me, 6 weeks is a little bit too early for a lot of roses. If roses don't need that long of a cold stratification time, they will start stratifying in the refrigerator at 6 weeks, right? So I will leave them, to 12 weeks, and only take them out after 12 weeks, or if they have started to germinate before that 12 weeks. So
I
I
do the
don't
same.
know how,
I,
so you do the same as well.
I collect I collect the hips, clean the hips, wash the hips, put them in the paper towel in the Ziploc with the name and the date that I collected them.
Yep.
And that date is the date they go in the refrigerator. The date that
Okay.
as soon as I collect, because I know me, I will
Uh-huh.
misplace the seeds. They're going straight into my little shoebox, plastic box in the refrigerator with the name, the date in the Ziploc. And I know 12 weeks from that date, I need to be checking. So I have
Yes.
it's like a little file cabinet of Ziploc bags, and I pop them out and I'm opening. And if there's mold, I'll change the napkin,
Yep.
start the process, name, date,
Yep.
all over again.
But don't let.
No, I lost you. Lost you. Uh, I think I lost you, Jeff. Ouch. Okay, all I see is a black screen, Jeff. What happened? Uh, technology, gotta love it. Uh, You're back.
I'm back. Okay, so I had to move into my garage. My phone overheated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it overheated. So I'm like, oh no. So I let me go outside. And we will I'll finish my live outside. Because it was just in the sun. I was talking about it, the glare. Um and my phone just like completely just turned off, and I'm like, what's going on? So it came back on. I wasn't sure if it like ended the live or what was going on. So lesson learned.
Here you go.
Lesson learned.
I hear you.
But it was starting to get a little warm in there. It was the sun, I think,
Are you
beating on
kidding?
the
It's
phone that
cold over here. It's brutal over here right now.
well, I would be more than happy to switch.
I have a,
You know,
I'm a hoodie.
yeah, no. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to go on the side of the house and show you some of my seedlings. Well, actually, my greenhouse. So here are some of the seedlings that I have from this year. So I think so. I was really surprised at how large your seedlings get compared to mine.
Mine's are huge.
Yeah. And mine never get that big until like the second year. But I think it's
But I
because of the climate.
think this one is another one. It's huge. And they're
Yeah,
in 1 gallon containers.
yeah. No, I get, mine are well, but these so like this one here is its parent is Whimsy, which is a miniature rose. So I wouldn't expect it to get,
Much
completely
bigger than that. But yeah,
right. But this actually the parent of this rose is Whimsy and it's yellow. So very interesting. But yeah, so no, I do. I know that we were talking earlier about about labels and what kind of ink pen. So this is one that I used with the Sharpie with water based. So this is I can still read it. It's a Fourth of July seedling. So I'm just gonna have to go. And here it is. It's about ready to bloom.
nice.
Yeah.
That's a
So
red.
yes, it's going to be mostly red. I do see like maybe a little bit of pink. So last year I had seedlings, Fourth of July seedlings, where if you're familiar with Fourth of July, it's kind of like a white and red, maybe a little bit of yellow, like splotches, and it's very
It's like a
random.
candy cane looking. I think I
Yeah.
have something similar. I think it's called Gia. I have Gia. I have Alfred Sicily and Sentimental.
Okay.
They're
Yep.
all they're all striped
Right.
roses.
Yeah.
And Sentimental is frozen. I mean, they're fragrant. Gia is a miniature. I have it.
Oh, Connie, you're gonna love Whimsy. Whimsy, and I will tell you, hopefully you find the same results. But Whimsy absolutely puts on hips, from open pollination, and its seeds are very viable. I had very good germination rate with Whimsy, and I have seen. I just showed you the yellow. So this is a Whimsy seedling. I have a ton of whites. So
Wow,
Whimsy does put
that's
out a
pretty.
lot of whites, some pinks, and then I've also had a couple of them. And of course, I don't have any of them blooming right now, but their buds are almost green prior to opening up, and they have just a little bit of a green tint to the
Hinge to
color.
it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
This
what
is
I.
Gia.
This, oh, that's beautiful. Is that purple,
That's red and white.
red, and white? Okay.
So that's
Yeah,
Gia.
I have.
It's a
It
mini.
reminds me of my rock and roll.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah. Well, and I know Neil Diamond. I never remember. I know either Neil Diamond is the parent of rock and roll is the parent of Neil Diamond. Because what Neil Diamond, I want to say is a hybrid tea, and rock and roll is a Floribunda. I want to say. I know one. I know one of them are is the parent of the other. But that's not my strong, my where I am. I don't want to say my weakness, but I am not the best at specific varieties. You show me a rose, and 9 times out of 10, I will be wrong is guessing the variety name. That's not my strength.
I'm pretty good at it. I've gotten pretty good at it.
Right. Yeah. That's I just never been into that. Or never was good at it. Now names, I remember name. Like people will say, "Oh, I have a da da da." I'm like, okay, I've heard of that rose, but telling you what it looks like, probably not.
Uh,
Probably not.
like I have what's it, Romantica Moonlight.
Hmm.
Romantica Moonlight. It's not a very good hip maker,
Right.
and I'm hoping that it has pollen
Right. Um, I,
because it's
I've noticed, I don't know if you have too, but it seems like the more modern that roses are, the more
the less,
difficult it is for those to set, especially as seed parents.
but they may be good
Pollen.
pollen providers, which
Right.
is great because that means that the cross that you made increases the chances of more viable seeds
Exactly. In the next generation.
generation. So
Yep.
that's how I said, okay, well, I like the form, not a good hit parent, but if I can cross this to something similar, the chances of me getting a similar cup, color, fragrance, form with a better chance of viable seeds, then here
Yes.
we go.
Yes.
Because
Well,
I believe its parent is uh Graham Thomas.
okay.
It's one of its seedlings,
Right.
Moonlight Romantic. So I'm like, oh wait,
Yeah. So Connie, so she asked if old garden roses, if they're better at setting hips. I have noticed that to be the case in general.
yes,
There, it's all about genetics, but I have noticed that usually, the older the rose variety, the
the
better
better.
it has of setting hips.
And also, the higher the petal count, the least likely it is to be viable of producing a hit or
Or
pollen.
open pollinated.
Yeah, yeah,
So
because
that is
the petal count doesn't allow for
the
the
bee to get into.
parts to form. Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of times, what I'll do with open pollination, because I have a rose I introduced last year. I didn't do it with that rose last year. I didn't get any hips, which I'm not surprised. Um, but this year, I'm going to try something a little bit different. Is the wind making it difficult?
You're good.
Fair. You can hear me fine.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Um, so I ended up getting a rose Earth Angel. And if you're
Nice.
familiar with Earth Angel, it has, I think, like 3 million petals with it. Um, and I don't think I'm exaggerating too much, but it has a lot of petals, and it is very difficult for it to be open pollinated because the pollinators are not able to get into it. So this year, what I'm going to do is um, pick out and remove some of the inner petals to expose the center. And I'm going to leave some of the outer petals so it can still be attractive to the pollinators, but they can get in to actually pollinate for me. So I'm going to give that a try, and I'll see if I'm able to get some hips from it this year.
Yeah. So
So
that's why I mentioned that because I'm like, damn, it's the petal count is wonderful for bouquets and but for breeding purposes, I'm like, ah,
right. Well, and that's also too, one that's also one reason why I also collect pollen the day before. Get the flower ready, the day prior to the pollination. I'm able to get into, the the able to get to the pollen. Oh, it's probably the wind. I'm going to go into the garage. Let me know if you can
Yeah,
hear
I can hear you now.
and you can see me.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to have to hang out in the garage. If my phone isn't overheating, then it's too windy. Let's see. Earth Angel is super healthy where I'm at, so that would be nice if a seedling can have that kind of disease resistance. Absolutely, and see that's so, Connie. That's exactly what's fun about the breeding part is that you have a rose for whatever reason. There's a certain trait that you really like. So I say go all out with Earth Angel, right? You're like, okay, I it's super healthy and resistant. So I'm going to use that. And then, it's kind of fun too to be like, okay, look at all the other different varieties of roses that you have in your yard and be like, okay, could I get, if I crossed Earth Angel with this rose, and it's a fun game to be like, okay, I wonder what the color is going to, end up looking like. What's the petal count going to be like? What's the fragrance? Is it going to be disease resistant? And that's part of the fun too. Is just kind of that guessing game. Oh, actually, I found that picture. So earlier, so this is that red Gallica.
That's
Yeah. So
gorgeous.
the seed parent is Tuscany Superb. It's a purple Gallica rose, deep purple, almost like a mauve. But its pollen parent is a red hybrid tea, Olympiad. So
That's
yeah, thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you. But yeah, so this is probably my favorite hybrid that I have. But like I said earlier, it only blooms once a year. Um, and has very, very little fragrance. I would say no fragrance. You could barely pick it up, but so that's why I am crossing this year with Mr. Lincoln, which is a red hybrid tea with a really good fragrance. So hopefully I can get that that's all I'm trying to get from that Mr. Lincoln is that the fragrance and the repeat bloom.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited. But with this rose, I didn't. That's why I was saying. This is the first generation. So, Tuscany Superb and Olympiad, right? That was just a random cross. I didn't have anything specific in mind with that cross. I'm like, hey, I'm just going to see if they work together and see what I get. And this is what I got. And now, it's like, okay, there's a lot of things. I kept this rose, and I did have it. It did open pollinate for me. I did get seeds from it this last year, um,
Nice.
but this year I've been hand pollinating that rose. With a lot of random ones too, but I'm making sure that I'm getting that Mr. Lincoln pollen onto that rose and quite a few of them, to try to get that fragrance and that repeat bloom out of it. um Porter's roses seem to love it here in Ohio. They're all really healthy. That's good to know. That's good to know. So I guess where I live, it's very dry. So I don't really get the black spot. So I try not to I try not to gloat about that. I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, so jealous that you don't get black spot. But I do get some powdery mildew, especially like earlier in the growing season, later in the growing season. But where I don't get the disease, the extreme heat and the extreme dryness makes up for it. Yeah, black spot. Yeah, well, I had black spot when I was over in Seattle, so I know black spot very, very well. But
We
sometimes
get
that
black
dry.
spot. I get
Yeah,
black spot back here a lot,
yeah,
really bad.
yeah.
But it rains a lot and it's humid all the time.
Right. But I have, we all have our own problem areas depending on the climate and where we're at. With it being so dry, I have a very difficult time when it gets to a certain temperature. Sometimes we can get it to about 110 degrees. And at that point, when you're 110, it doesn't matter how much water you give them. They just start, they start preserving water in the roots, and everything just starts drooping. Doesn't matter how much water you give them. They're like, okay, I'm keeping all the water in the roots. So the flowers will start drooping. I do lose quite a few rose hips, because they just, the plant is not wasting water. It's trying to preserve itself, from the extreme heat. Um, so I have, even us dry area people, have
But you
problems.
managed to get 7,000 seeds, so you did pretty good.
Yes. Oh, well, actually, I ended up with more than 7,000 seeds. Those are
Oh my
just the ones
God.
I planted. I
Oh,
did. So I have a website, and I don't use this live, it's like, promotion or anything like that. But I do have a website, and I did sell rose seeds online last year for people that wanted to grow roses from seed, but didn't have
oh, that's
access to
cool.
them. So I did sell quite a few rose seeds, which was really nice. And they weren't like super expensive or anything. The main goal was to get people, to give it a try themselves that wanted to. It wasn't to be a millionaire overnight, which I definitely am not. I think when I did my taxes after everything was said and done, I think I was like maybe close to 100 in the profit. So nothing.
Eh,
Taxes are killer
it's
here
a
in
start.
Washington. But the main goal is just to get other people interested and enjoy breeding and growing them from seed. And there's quite a few people that ordered them, where they've been showing me pictures where they did get some germination. A couple people have done very well with the seeds that they got. Some people didn't get great results. But that's that
That's part of the process.
right, right. But it was important for me to be able to offer seeds that I know that people would have the best chance of success. It's unfortunate, but you go online and you look for rose seeds. A lot of times you'll see people that they'll advertise blue roses, black roses, the rainbow roses, the
Nope.
seeds, and they charge people quite a bit for those. And sorry to break it to all of you, but blue roses don't exist. Black roses don't exist. Rainbow roses, bright green roses, they just don't,
Don't.
they don't exist. And if these sellers are being very deceptive with giving you photoshopped or dyed flower colors, how good of quality are the seeds going to be, even if they are rose seeds?
No.
And it's very disheartening to see people order black rose seeds, and they don't get the results that they were expecting. And
Scammers everywhere.
right, and they give up, trying again, because it's like, well, I tried it before, it didn't work. I'm not able to do it, so I'm not going to try it again. Where in fact they could have been very successful if they had gotten seeds from someone who actually gave them higher quality rose seeds that actually
Yeah.
existed. So, the
And
seeds
that's
that
good
I
that you do
provided
that.
for, yeah, the seeds that I provided for people were seeds that I've been successful with in the past myself. So I knew that, that those seeds that people got, they had the best chance of, success. Um,
That's cool.
but let's see. I ended up growing two weeds somehow, but learned a lot from the process. Perfect, perfect. Yeah. And Connie, I'm glad though that's what you took. That's what you got out of it, is that you learned a lot. And with you talking about wanting to pollinate roses or allow for open pollination in your own garden, and giving it, and continuing to do it. You didn't let You didn't let anything discourage you. You got value out of learning, of gaining experience, and just keep
Keep
on
at it.
at it, and you will get it. You will get it.
Yep.
Um,
Not how
and
you get
let's
there. It's just the
exactly,
journey.
exactly. Those other online rose seed sellers, they don't give any instructions, or they give incorrect instructions.
That's how you know it's a scam.
Right. I always laugh when I see, or like, oh, when you get the seeds, plant them. And right when you get the seeds, plant them, and they will start, growing for you in 30 days. And it's like, there's a couple things that we skipped here. They have to be cold stratified. They have to feel like they have
Uh,
gone through a winter.
mm.
They could be very viable, but they will not allow themselves to germinate until they feel that winter has come and gone. Um,
Oh, what the one thing I've never done is stored seeds. Like you know how you overwinter tomato seeds from year to year.
yeah.
I've never done
See,
that. Like how
and I
long do rose
store.
seeds last in storage?
Excuse me. I store seeds, my rose seeds. So usually, because it is a lot colder here, um, I usually will store my seeds for anywhere for about a month to 2 months. Usually, I don't start stratifying my rose seeds until right around Thanksgiving time. So towards the end of November, beginning of December is when I start stratifying.
No, what
But
I'm saying is, how long can you store rose seeds for? 1, 2, 3, 4 years?
that I am actually in.
I've never done that.
Right. I'm in the process of knowing, of learning how long you can. So I have a big bag of rose seeds, and what I do is that every year I plant about 1 to 200 of them, just to see what the germination rate is, and I take note of that. And then from each year, as I continue to do it, I'm going to see how much that germination rate of those seeds actually go down.
Drop. Okay. I mean,
So
I've
I'm
never done it. One day I'll get curious and do it.
Right. Generally, I would suggest, storing your seeds. I'll store them for 1 to 2 months before I get them dried, and I put them in a bag for 1 to 2 months. Then I get them stratified. So I would, with any seed, the least amount, you're gonna have better success the
The
less
quicker you
time that they're
stratify
stored.
them,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. But no, I'm testing that out, with the bag of seeds that I have. So I'm
Good to know.
on. Yeah, this year was year two, and I actually have not seen a huge difference between the first year and the second year. So that's kind of kind of promising so far, but not enough. I'll have to do it a lot more before I'm more confident in telling people, oh yeah, they're good for 2 years, because honestly I don't know. But because I don't know, I know what I'm able to test and experiment with, so then that way I can be, so I can figure it out.
Okay.
And um, there is something quite special about figuring out an answer that you have a question to on your own, as opposed to from someone else telling you. You will always learn and retain information, if you learn it
Hands
from
on
yourself.
is always better. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know about you, but my jaw is starting to hurt from talking so much. And
Good.
we've been doing a live for, let's see, almost 2 hours now. So
Yeah. We have.
yeah, yeah. So that's crazy. Well, and
Okay.
I know
This has
before
been
this live,
fun.
you and I were talking for a while too. So Sorry that you've had to put up with me for pretty much,
That's fine. It's been fun.
all your evening. So, but yeah, so unless anybody else has any questions, I think now would be a good time for us to wrap it up. And I just want to thank you so much, Frank, for doing this live with me. I do lives quite a bit, and I believe this was your first live that you've done. So I'm really happy that you were like, yeah, let's do this live. I know it can
No
be
problem.
very lives can be very kind of scary and weird at first. It's like, y- because no one, I'm not right in front of you, no one in the chat, is right in front of you, so it can seem really awkward staring into your phone, talking into your phone, no one else is around. Or I
Buddy
see
else.
that you're outside, so I don't know, like people are walking by, you're like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm just weird because I'm just like randomly talking, y- you know.
It's fine.
So, yeah, and thank you so
Well,
much,
thanks for
Connie,
having
for
me.
coming in. Yeah, Frank, and then if you're open to it, I think it might be a cool thing for us to do, like maybe a joint live like this, like
Sure.
once a month or something, and
That'd
then
be
we can
great.
just
Let me
kind of
know. We'll
chat with
collaborate.
what we're up to, what we're doing, show what our roses are looking like. If we're stratifying, we can show each other our refrigerators,
That's
whatever
fine.
step that we're on.
That'll work. Absolutely.
All
I'm
right.
into it.
Awesome. Well, Frank, you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Connie
All right,
and
guys.
who else
It's been
ever
fun.
is in here, you have a wonderful night too. Thanks for coming in. If you have any
Have
questions,
a good
feel
night, guys.
free to reach out. You have a good night too, Frank. Feel free to reach out to either one of us if you have any questions or comments.
If you guys
And
want to reach out to me, I'm Let's Be
yes, let us be sustainable. I believe they can tap on you or something like that, and they can find
Follow
your
me
your
there.
channel as well. So, and your channel is
All right,
amazing
guys.
too. All right, awesome. You all have a wonderful
Have a
night,
good night.
and we will talk to you later on.
Bye.
Bye.